What's up, everybody? Kong Spideyzilla back at it with another video, and tonight we're gonna be tackling another fanfiction crossover story of mine, and that is Godzilla versus Hulk. So, very shortly ago, I just did Godzilla versus Bowser. I recommend you check that one out if you're interested. Um, so going down the path of rewrites for my first few fanfiction crossover stories. The next one here is Godzilla versus Hulk. Now, which is very fitting now because there has been a theme lately of Godzilla, crossing paths with the Hulk. Now, technically, they already did have a crossover already in the form of a comic book where I think it's just simply Godzilla versus Hulk, obviously. Um, and I believe, but I've never I know about the plot and story of that, but it's completely different compared to mine. At the time when I made Godzilla versus Hulk, the original version, by the time I got done with that, like probably like almost exactly a couple years back, maybe that that was shortly after. I think that a little while after that was when they announced that they are doing an official Godzilla and Hulk crossover, but it just so happened to be way different compared to, how I always imagined a Godzilla versus Hulk story, like how it would play out. So this is going to be more like a remastered 2.0 version of that original crossover versus fanfiction story. And if you go back and check, my videos, actually all my videos, you will notice I still have the original versions of the fan stories up. That is because, you can probably go back and, look, how different it was, and make a comparison between those original versions of my fan fiction stories and compare them with these new updated versions, I'm putting out now. And maybe, you guys and gals had a nostalgia for that, for those videos, and, so for you, I'm gonna keep them up. So, even now, when I'm making these, newer, updated versions of the stories. So, and I'm gonna let you guys and gals know that like, we are keeping continuity here. Obviously, we are keeping continuity. It's just that this isn't really the crossovers. They're not really going to be sequels or prequels to each other. Like, they're just going to be in the same continuity. So, kind of very, very fittingly enough for Hulk. Hulk versus Thor and Hulk versus Wolverine, the animated double feature. It's going to be kind of like that, where fun fact, those movies actually take place in the same continuity, the same, that specific Marvel Earth slash universe, you know. And even though Hulk versus Thor is not a sequel or prequel, however you want to look at it, Hulk versus Thor is not a sequel. I personally think it happens, and I think it happens later in the timeline of that universe, long after Hulk versus Wolverine, maybe. But Hulk versus Thor is not a. We're going by that. Hulk versus Thor is not really a sequel, I consider it, but more like a different story, but just in the same, canon, in the same, continuity. With with this story here, I imagine this, taking place, shortly after the events, the previous events, with Godzilla versus Bowser. So, but this is a completely different crossover story. So we are keeping continuity. This is not a sequel, but we are keeping continuity. So, because I want it to be its own thing, but tell me, am I right about that or am I wrong? I don't know. That's how I kind of like to view it. But anyways, now we're gonna get right into the fan fiction crossover story itself. So, starting right now. So, our story starts off with a bang where we immediately cut to Bruce Banner, in like a he's hiding out in like an area, and obviously he's in a hideout, and next thing you know, like he figures out, that the military is close to him and that they're onto him, and then there he goes on the run again. We start off with that, and then however, stuff goes wrong before the military can reach him. A bit of a catastrophic thing happens where like it just so happens to be an accident, basically, where just like maybe like Banner accidentally falls or he gets hurt, or Bruce Banner is along with him almost being caught. You know, things are about to get really hairy, and things get even more hairy. Where Bruce Banner, he can't take anymore. The adrenaline boost and the emotions get the best of him, and he transforms into the Hulk. We don't see have I like to have this thing where we don't see the Hulk right away. It's kind of like in the 2008 movie where he's kind of kept in the shadows, and we like see like little glimpses of him. But of course, he's fighting the military. He's fighting the army. General Ross's army, and obviously this is supposed to take place in a time where Bruce is still being, even though like he had a few crossovers, with some of the other Marvel characters already. We're still in that time frame where he's still on the run from Ross. So, stuff gets really e- even more bad, with the Hulk fighting the army and that stuff. And out of nowhere, like Hulk just has enough of the military. Like we don't see him, we only see glimpses of him or like him in the shadows, and then something really bad happens, and like a huge explosion goes off or something from like the Hulk's power of like a nearby power plant or something, or like a big chunk of like a mountain just completely just like gets destroyed or demolished, like some like or just like a huge explosion malfunction happens from like one of the huge military vehicles or something. And we even see a glimpse of like the Hulk's like like a lot of the Hulk's power, like almost looked like a disaster event happened. And we cut to Godzilla and his son resting under the ocean, and we see like we see them like like a something like a disaster, like what looks like a destructive event like happen like in the distance or something, and it almost looks like Godzilla like senses something or he feels something. He wakes up, and then him and little Godzilla are disturbed. you know their rests are disturbed, and then of course Godzilla lets out a defensive like angered roar, like underwater. So basically the Hulk's power basically woke up Godzilla. But the thing is, Hulk isn't even in Japan, at least not until yet, but like still like a far distance away. But like from that far away, Godzilla felt it. Like that means that like the Hulk's power like reached to that levels of big already. It reached that far of the distance where it awakened Godzilla and his son from the rest. And of course, Godzilla is peed off, and you know what that means. You know, he's gonna defend his son. And he thinks it's the humans trying to mess with him again, or like getting ready to like destroy him and his son or whatever. And because I imagine these to be like movies, this is where we normally would epic open up with a epic title card and like epic opening credits and this and that. And so moving on with the story, Bruce Banner wakes up somewhere, and he just so happens to be in Japan. And where the human characters that we're used to seeing in Godzilla movies, like in my like headcanon crossover stories here, these characters are connected to some of the human characters that we have seen in Godzilla movies before. So maybe like a couple or a few of them stumble across, Bruce Banner, now just with his pants on and that stuff. They feel huge sympathy, like they see that like he looks tired and drained, like he looks like he's hurt, and then they take him in because like they want to help him, and so they get him like they help him out. He gets all like he becomes more awake now, more aware, and he notices and finally he catches on eventually that oh, I'm in Japan now, like been basically meaning that yeah, he traveled a good far distance away already. Obviously when he was the Hulk before he calmed down and transformed back to Bruce. So and then he gets introduced to the characters, like he meets with them, and like eventually he, obviously Bruce Banner is highly intelligent, so he slowly like is being taught to learn the language. And, he basically gets taken in, by the characters, and he starts to learn the language, to speak Japanese, because like he explains like he was caught up in like a very bad accident, and like he basically had to stay there, for a little while. you know Obviously, he has to lay low, and his normal like undercover, uh like I like to imagine that his normal like undercover, like incognito name is obviously like Dr. David or something. Like obviously he comes up with a different name like a lot of the time, but that is like seems to be a common one, Dr. David. Obviously the name David is a reference to the alternate name in, the original Hulk 70s TV show. So we get him interacting with these, human characters that we normally see in Godzilla movies, and like they they show a lot of sympathy for him, and like basically he's adjusting to the environment and to like the city he has to hide out in for a while, but like he explained that he's traveling the world and this and that, he has to keep moving forward. So like he's getting used to Japan, and he's actually starting to kind of like it over there. And Bruce is already building like a good bond with the people that took him in, which obviously makes sense because he's a nice guy, and he helps the people, very much in character in him, because plus in the 70s TV show, like he gets along with the people and that stuff, and he befriends them, you know builds a good bond with them. So it's pretty much the case here, and in other forms of Hulk media. Meanwhile, we cut to General Ross and the army trying to track him down, and they just so happen to take a wild guess, or like they find the evidence that you know the Hulk's traces lead to Japan. So like now they easily catch on that he must be hiding. Ross is like haha, he must be hiding in this city. And I would even like to have a part of like they show the news that warning, there might have been, you know, there might have been traces of a kaiju or something, lurking nearby. So like the city is like hesitant. The city in Japan, is kind of in fear, obviously very much so. But the but according to like the reporters, they say like it's probably gone by now. It probably moved on. But obviously, this was the Hulk, landing in Japan, attempting to find peace there, and then that's when he transformed back into Bruce. So it's like show like a little cool thing on the news there, and then like Bruce Banner gets like more of the information. It's haha, that's how I got here. And we cut to you know a scene where like the army is like doing this like experiment thing, you know, and not General Ross's army, the army of Japan, obviously, and like they're in the ocean, like they're doing they're doing like a little bit of an investigation, or well, it looks like that at first, but they come up with this new type of weaponry that they think can actually defeat Godzilla because the army don't like the kaiju and they think that they pose a threat, even though like the the kaiju has helped them before. But you might be questioning like, wait, don't they need the kaijus around for like aliens and this and that? But like any new monster, wreaks havoc. Well, this is because like this is at a point where basically for now, like on the Godzilla side of the story, where excuse me, where all the Godzilla on the Godzilla side of the story, where pretty much most, like almost all the Godzilla kaiju were like defeated or like not cited since, and like a couple of years ago there was this like kaiju war, battle between like the aliens, and the people of Japan. So they think that there is no aliens, so like they don't need, and they don't want the people to be constantly living in fear. So like they want to take out Godzilla first. So, and of course, that all goes to poo. It doesn't work, so they track down Godzilla's location and attempt to try this like new weapon on him, like, and it doesn't work. It just pees him off. Little Godzilla gets protected. His son, and he wreaks havoc on them and just like wipes them all out. um, there was a situation that happened where the Godzilla and his son were living on an island, and like the island got blown up due to like some weird accidental like experimenting from like one of the other countries. So Godzilla and his son are like trying to find a bit of a home now. So Godzilla defeats, the army that's in the ocean, and then him and his son like kind of move on. However, there are only a few lucky survivors that make it back, and they notify that Godzilla, he's running and active again. Like he's on the loose again, and obviously everyone is freaking out. It's on the news, and then this one Bruce Banner learns that this city is definitely, this country is definitely not safe because of all the giant monster stuff that happens here. And with the general guy, General Ross, trying to like track him down and that stuff, like Bruce Banner realized, he needs to get out of here, he needs to move. And of course, they find out that Betty is like trying to get into contact with Bruce. She's trying to get into contact with him, and like the other human characters, they're like like they're sad that like he has to leave, he has to move on and go. Um so, you know, but like he says his goodbyes and this and that. Um but when he makes his exit, it's already too late. He realized that the military tracked him down there again, and once again he gets chased. And we get like a Bruce Banner, army chase scene in Japan, but eventually, pretty much like the Incredible Hulk 2008 film, poo hits the fan. They both end up in a bad scenario, and that is when, well, thinking about this, like how it should play out now, I think how this is the best way to incorporate the scene, at least in my opinion. Bruce is on the run, and then like in the midst of like the craziness of the chase, these people are like trying to work on something like this technology. However, like this just so happens to be like a town or city like near the mountain area, and the the chase gets that hairy to the point where the sensitive technology thing, that's not really good. Something happens to it, it accidentally gets shot at. It gets wonky, and it just so happens to somehow lead to like a gigantic explosion in the city near the mountain area, and like a piece of like a building like flows off and like crash lands like in the mountains area, and then that blows up. you know it's crazy, like it's sometimes, in fiction like this stuff happens like that. And to make matters even worse, and guess who was just chilling in those mountains? Yes, Anguirus was just chilling and like resting in those mountains. He was like resting under the ground. Anguirus just so happened to be resting in that area, and of course, this pees off Anguirus, and then like he thinks that the humans have probably like found him or something, and they're trying to get rid of him. So Anguirus makes his way towards the city, and he just starts messing stuff up. So now Bruce and the army are caught up, you know, in a hairy situation. Of course, this leads to Banner, under extreme stress and like adrenaline, and he realized that his friends are in danger. In combination with everything, his own life on the line. Of course, combination of all of that, he transforms into the Hulk. We get like a build up to Hulk's appearance, and then eventually, finally, we see the Hulk himself, and all of his angry, rageful glory. So this is obviously going to show like more of Hulk's like obviously the tragic monster, scary, rageful monster side is there, but but I also we obviously got to show like his superhero side. So this is like a good scene to show it. It's like it's nobody's fault. It was the army's fault for accidentally waking up Anguirus. It's not really fair that that city's going to get destroyed and that stuff. So that city is getting messed up, and then that's when Hulk comes in and he challenges Anguirus and he starts fighting him. Anguirus is like weirded out by him because like he's like this little small thing that is actually slowly starting to rival his like strength and power, and he's actually struggling against this small little tiny opponent. It's a pretty hairy fight. Anguirus and the Hulk, they duke it out, and like Hulk starts to realize that like the situation around him, like that people, are in danger. So like he tries to like put his focus onto like saving and protecting some of the people and like from Anguirus. Obviously, this leads to him taking more damage though, but of course, he only gets angrier and he gets stronger. So eventually, him and Anguirus, like take the fight to like the back up to the mountains, and in Showa fashion, they both fall down, fall off a cliff, and they land into the water. We don't see what happened to Hulk. We don't see what happened to Anguirus. But eventually, I would like to show, Anguirus comes out and like he's swimming to find a new resting place, and we see Hulk kind of emerge from, the debris, and then like he leaps off somewhere. And obviously, it's on the news. Japan is thinking like, what is this green like giant that's like attempting to defend us and this and that? This is another monster, but he's not really a kaiju. He's not a giant monster, but he was like rivaling the power of like Anguirus and that stuff. So they they separate, and then our story continues. Obviously like the news, we saw what happened on the news. Like there's this like green creature, rageful creature that was duking it out with Anguirus, and like we don't know where they went, and like Anguirus was seen like swimming away to like find a new territory. Like we don't know where the green dude went, and they're finally this creature has been identified, as the Hulk. And then there's this like debate saying that like there's even this debate in Japan where there's this group that's like there's this other side that's like, oh, Hulk is a monster, he needs to be destroyed like the other kaiju, and like there's these people, but you have this minor group of like defenders like, no, this creature actually attempted to save my life, from the kaiju attack and this and that from Anguirus. Well, voice crack. Um, yeah, so like there's this interesting, discuss, and the Japanese army confronts General Ross's army, and they are peed off with him. Like they realize, like you caused this, right? Like you caused it. You're the one that caused Anguirus to awaken and attack the city. Like we know that you're tracking down this green creature, but guess what? You drove him to our country. We already have enough destructive, powerful, rageful monsters roaming around. We don't need another one. So there's this whole argument, and then after sorting things out, General Ross and a couple of like members of the Japanese army get to the military army get both armies actually eventually come up with the idea, like generals, like, you want to get rid of these earth kaijus, right? Like you want to get rid of them. And like, but like you guys seem to be struggling with that, like you seem to be not succeeding at that. And ge- you know they realize that like it's so dang difficult for them to take out the Hulk, and capture Bruce Banner. And he they he puts it together and just like, wait a minute, the Hulk was taking on that giant monster that we awakened on accident and that started attacking the city. And then it all just clicks together, and like, what if we you like somehow like get the Hulk to fight the other earth monsters, the other earth kaijus. And then like the Japanese military army starts some of them start like venting to General Ross and like members of his army how like they're trying to, like, obviously Godzilla is their most their most powerful and destructive one they have to deal with. Like, like, we've been trying to like take out Godzilla for years, decades upon decades, and we never succeeded. So like then like it finally clicks together, and this is when they form a plan, like, what if we get the Hulk and Godzilla to fight each other? Like, maybe with their like indestructible power, maybe the Hulk is the key to beating Godzilla, and maybe Godzilla is the key to beating the Hulk. And like maybe we can somehow get Hulk to fight the other earth kaijus first and this and that. Or maybe like we can get them to fight each other first, and like eventually, like, and if they do take each other out, we can still plan to wipe out the other earth kaijus. So despite having an argument, they eventually come into agreement, and like they end up working together to rid the world of the earth kaijus and the Hulk. Maybe what is left of the Hulk's traces, like, Ross is planning to use that, for weapons, obviously, that he can create. So, we cut to Bruce, he's awakened, like, you know, obviously back, as normal as Bruce, and, he's discovered by more people. So, once again, he's taken in, because they feel sympathy for him, and he recovers, he gets back on his feet. He's like now in a different city of Japan. We meet more normal other human characters, and he builds a bond with them. Like, now, like, Betty ends up in Japan too, and she's actually willing to risk her life to help Bruce Banner get out of that like very hairy situation he is in. She gets back in touch with him, and Mothra and the Twin Fairies end up getting involved. So Mothra is like in a larvae state here, and she was reincarnated not long ago, very shortly ago actually. So, and Mothra and the Twin Fairies, they're all about protecting the Earth, keeping things in balance. They sense that this is no, 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 this is not good. You know, the Hulk and Godzilla fighting each other, that is gonna destroy and threaten the planet. So like they're gonna have to try to find a way to prevent this, and obviously, they get, they decide that they're gonna help out, the like our main protagonists and that stuff. And then we come back to the army, and because Ross has an obsession, with making a weapon, and even the military, of Japan is aware, that Godzilla has a son, and eventually, the general catches on to this, and just like because he also wants to make weapons, and he realized that like, what if we can use one of them as like a weapon and this and that, and then he brings up Godzilla's son, and like maybe like this is like how we're gonna another way we can get the Hulk and Godzilla to fight each other. So like at first, the Japanese army is like reluctant, but they also huh, that's an interesting idea. Like maybe we can get a kaiju, an earth kaiju, that we can control in this and that, that can help us out in the future. So they get this crazy idea of capturing Godzilla's son, and they have been notified. They gotten, through like certain um like members in like a helicopter, traveling. They just so happen to spot that Godzilla and his son have recently found a new island. So like now this kind of gives them even more of a chance to, you know, eventually capture Godzilla's son. It's like to use him for like a weapon or something. So the plan goes into action. They, like they drop like huge explosions onto the island. They, the military and army fight Godzilla. Godzilla like puts, his son like to protect him, like he kind of helps him get to like a safe area, and they really lead Godzilla far away from that, area, but he thinks that his son is safe because like he put him somewhere, obviously that is safe, where he wouldn't get hurt. And like they're going all out on him with like this new technology weapon. It's doing nothing but just peeing him off. But they also plan like a trap for him somewhere that like causes him to like basically like lose his balance, and like a mountain like comes crashing down on like a small part of a mountain comes like crashing down on him, and like he falls somewhere here. And this is when they take the opportunity to use their advanced trap that they built specifically for Godzilla's son to capture him. And then they take him away. Obviously, this is not good. They take his son away, and Godzilla breaks out of like what he was buried under, from the debris, and he just completely just wipes away the army, their defenses, and their what did they created their new weaponry for him. And just a couple of like enraged atomic breath blasts, he just completely destroys them and wrecks them. However, a good chunk of them did get away with his son, and like Godzilla's now like he's looking for his son, and like realize, like that you know he's possibly been taken. He senses it, and he lets out a rageful roar, and then that's when he goes, start searching for him. He's on the hunt now. But now, like with the army's like combined, team, like they're doing everything in their power to like hold Godzilla back, and to prevent him from possibly tracking down and reaching his son. So like a good through this little portion of the movie, it's Godzilla versus the army. Well, two armies that have joined forces, and of course, they don't stand a chance against him. He just wipes the floor with them with no difficulty. All they do is just pee him off even more. So the military actually makes an accidental big goof up, and trying to provoke Godzilla near a city, and this is obviously going to trigger him to also attack and destroy the nearby city. Obviously, the military alerts people, in these like cities, like to evacuate. You know, Godzilla, is rageful now. He's on the loose. He's wreaking havoc again. However, Mothra is all about the balance. So she actually, you know, Godzilla, getting ready to destroy a city, with a dozens of innocent lives in it. Mothra, however, stops it. Mothra larvae shows up to stop and Godzilla from doing that. And however, this pees off Godzilla and this turns him against Mothra. You know, Mothra's like trying to do this thing where she's just trying to like stop Godzilla from destroying the city. She is trying to, and then like there's this interaction where Mothra larvae looks like she's trying to lead him, but Godzilla is just like so consumed with rage, and he takes Mothra larvae, like from his point of view, it looks like she's trying to defend the people. So it's like kind of like, oh, you're on their side too. Well, I'm guessing I'm gonna have to like destroy you then. You're working with my enemy, therefore that makes you, my enemy. He's basically like that. But Mothra is like trying to convince him, that she is like just trying to help. But however, Godzilla's already been provoked. He's gonna attack and fight her. So there's a bit of a short battle sequence between Mothra larvae and Godzilla. Mothra she picks up a decent fight, but she ends up getting her butt kicked and she has to retreat. Godzilla chases her, but eventually she manages to luckily get away. So we cut back to Bruce Banner's story. We find out that Betty, she makes it to Japan to eventually, attempt to help Bruce because, like, she feels like, he needs major help. Even though he does have people helping him, like he needs all the help he's gonna need. She tracks him down, and they have like a very touching, heartwarming, reuniting moment. And eventually, this is when the normal human characters find out that, he is Dr. Bruce Banner. He isn't no normal man at all. So, he is a man with a beast within. However, they are on his side, and the news gets out that Godzilla's son is going to be like used as like a weapon or something to fight against the Earth Kaiju, and this and that to like, or like for the future. And of course, our good human characters are not happy about this. They are against that. Of course, some of them repeat off that Godzilla and his son should be left in peace. Like, why do we need to destroy them? This is just their home. We keep provoking him. This is not good. But this is threatening to like our civilization over here, and most likely the whole world itself. Bruce Banner is against this as well, and eventually, um, they Bruce ends up catching on that once again, there are parts of General Ross's army that is on to him again. He gets tracked down. Banner catches on, and that's when he's on the run again. He's on the move. We have an extended chase sequence, and eventually, they get to these like it ends up leading into this like smaller type of city that's like near mountains. Like it's like an area in Japan, obviously, of course. They're like where these big mountains, and but this time some of the Japanese army is actually kind of helping this time. However, something malfunctions, and it all goes wrong, and you know they all get caught up. The military vehicle crashes into like a, like an advanced technological like type of machine, and that creates a huge explosion, and and, and just like some stuff just collapse, vehicles, the chase just so happens to get that chaotic. But it can't get worse enough, right? Like, oh no, Rodan just so happened to be chilling in those nearby mountains, and his rest gets disturbed. And of course, this causes Rodan to start wreaking havoc on the city. So the Japanese army turned their attention towards Rodan, and so does like that good chunk of General Aras's army. They turn their attention to Rodan and get ready to take on him. They call for backup and reinforcements. A good chunk of it. Rodan becomes a threat, and basically, it's Rodan versus the army, and of course, they don't stand a chance against him. And Bruce Banner just so happens, he ends up just so happening to get, obviously, because he was being chased, he gets far separated from, Betty and like his like other characters that he built a bond with, and he realizes that people in the city are gonna be in major danger now. There's gonna be a lot of there's gonna be a lot of deaths now, and well, but now his friends he made along the way are obviously they're there too, and Betty is there. So like he's crushed like under debris, like he looks like it's fatal injury, like but because it's a fatal injury, and like what he's seeing before his eyes that his loved ones are in danger, or the adrenaline, and like not to mention not having the power or strength to save his loved ones. We get a little bit of a flashback to his childhood trauma, and of course this triggers him to transform into the Hulk again. So before Rodan, fully like annihilates the city, like in flight, we see the Hulk just jump up and just like and tackle Rodan, and they go flying towards another area. But because like Rodan has this burning fire energy, Hulk is getting severely burned up. Hmm. However, he keeps trying to hold on, and it's only just making him angrier. And then him and Rodan, they fight in the air a little bit, and him and Rodan crash down into like a nearby like field mountain area. And then now we have the Hulk fighting Rodan. Hmm. Like and basically like Rodan has like a similar reaction like when Hulk fought Anguirus, just like who does this little dude think he is? He's taking on me with his big son. Like Rodan has like a surprised look and reaction, and then like Rodan just like gets irritated and ticked off. You know, him and Hulk, have a dirty fight. Obviously they fight on the ground for a little bit, but then Rodan, takes things to the sky. Like I want to have this cool moment where like Hulk, there's jets involved. Like Ronan, is trying to attack Hulk from the sky now, since that's Ronan's domain. Hulk like runs on like he leaps onto like the top of a mountain, and like when Ronan is like coming to get him or something, that's when Hulk takes the opportunity to like jump onto him. Then like he climbs onto him, and it's basically like giving similar vibes to like that scene in the Hulk 2003 movie where he's basically like fighting the Jets somewhat, although it's to a net maximum. Or it's also giving off vibes like in the old Rodan movie where he's fighting the Jets, and also in the King of the Monsters 2019 movie, Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, where Rodan is like taking on the Jets. Like it kind of gives off those similar vibes. And then suddenly there's this huge power clash in the clouds, and like Hulk and Rodan, fall a very far distance down, and like there's this catastrophic crash. Like a whole mountainside just crumbles. Oh, there's some catastrophicness in that rough landing, and then we see Rodan, come out of like whatever debris he's in, or like in the water, and then he flies off. The Hulk emerges from the debris that he's in, and he gets to to leap off somewhere else again. And then our other main protagonists, like they're trying to like, you know, like they're trying to comprehend the situation, what just went down, and then like they kind of retreat. So, you know, they recover and this and that, and then we cut back to Mothra larvae on Infant Island, with the twin fairies, and Mothra larvae goes into a cocoon state. Basically she's getting ready to go into her imago form. And then we cut to Hulk, he's traveled somewhere, you know, where now he's roaming around in like the fields, the mountains, trying to find peace. So once it starts to look like Hulk is calming down, and like we get a sense of his loneliness and that stuff, and like showing that, like, yeah, he is a lonely, broken, tragic creature. And then like he looks like he's found his peace, until we figure out that the military tracked him down, and they make a bold move on trying to capture, or Bruce as the Hulk. So they take a risk, and we have another Hulk solo action moment here. Or, Hulk has a standoff with the army. Obviously their plan doesn't work, it fails. Hulk wipes the floor with them, he wins easily. he and then he leaps off to somewhere else, and it just so happens to take place, in a nearby city. And basically the army sends like whatever, what is left of their like little reinforcements that they have there in that area. And of course, the battle sequence goes on a little longer, and then eventually Hulk defeats them. But of course, I like to have a couple of moments where like he realizes that there are a couple people in danger, and he actually saves like a couple of the people. So like showing, once again, showing Hulk's superhero side. Hulk defeats the remaining army forces, and then he leaps off to go calm down somewhere. And the army did try to use some form of new weaponry, but obviously it didn't work, and they lost the battle against Hulk. So Hulk goes to chill somewhere, to go have his peace. And we come back to the military, trying to plan, what to do with Godzilla's son, and like their new like weaponry technology that because General Ross's army has formed, an alliance with the Japanese army. And they get a notification, like they're trying to track down, where they try with all their power to track down where Godzilla is heading next, and they find out that Godzilla is heading towards a city. So they just so happen to get in contact with the city early, just in time to get the people to evacuate the area, you know, and that's when Godzilla shows up, and he just starts wrecking stuff and destroys like a huge city, turns the huge city into a sea of flames, obviously, and a huge standoff moment with Godzilla and the army. And of course, Godzilla just completely dominates them. Once again, no chance, even with like their new weaponry and that stuff, uh, combined with what unique weaponry General Ross's army has. So Godzilla goes back into the ocean, and he goes back to searching for his son. You know, However, Godzilla does sense that he is getting close, though. So, he's getting close to his son's location, and the army catches on to this. They're getting ready to transport, Godzilla Jr., little Godzilla, to another, location. Meanwhile, we cut back to, we do like a bit of a time jump to where Bruce, he's already, he's back to normal again, and he's trying to get back to square one. Um, he gets some help from people, and eventually, his, you know, his new friends eventually tracks him down along with Betty, and then he start they start trying to devise, like to put together a plan, to set Godzilla's son free, so like they don't have to go through all of this, and Godzilla, isn't gonna threaten, Japan. He just wants his son, so they're gonna try to break the military's control, but like how they're gonna do that, they're trying their best. However, some of the human characters, um, with obviously our human characters we see in the Godzilla movies, they have some associations with some of the people who are working, with that army. So like, there's gonna be like this whole like trying to convince thing, you know, like that we like convince him like they don't need to go along with this plan. It's too risky and this and that. They listen. They do listen. They're gonna try to plan a way like out of it. They confront them. Meanwhile, Bruce and Betty, they're trying to form a plan of like how to get Godzilla's son out of there. Like, it's pretty much a drama scenario along with like a battle plan. So however, most of the army ends up disagreeing, with the regular human protagonists, and they're going to continue on with their plan. However, they the other members, that are associated with the good guys, members who are a part, of that army team, you know, they're forced, to kind of help. So like that sadly, that doesn't work out, and they're continuing on with the weapon. They just can't convince, the army to stop. So Godzilla, they found out that Godzilla is getting there fast. So they already set up like traps for him, and like they're sending out like their strongest weapons that they have against him, obviously, with General Ross's, army power combined with the Japanese military's power. And of course, that's still not going to work, even though they try. However, Betty and Bruce can hack into the system, and that will basically free Godzilla's son so he can go back to his dad. So, some of the good like characters that work in that army, they kind of switch to the good guy side. They help our protagonists out, and they actually have Bruce and Betty, actually sneak in there. They end up, hacking, into some of the devices. So everything's going according to the good guys' plan. They're gonna get Godzilla's son out of there. However, like, unfortunately, there's a couple or like other soldiers that catch on to like, they catch on to the plan that's going on, and eventually, they get caught. But however, Bruce attempts to get out of there along with Betty. They don't know that they don't know about like the army members that are kind of technically traitors to them, though. So they don't know about that part. But however, like the rest of the army, along with General Ross, like end up putting it together. Like Banner's here, and he's trying to free like the son of Godzilla and that stuff. So he just so happens to barely escape. So like now he's on the run, but surprise, Godzilla shows up, and but however, he's in the far, far distance, and the military has to take action, on both sides, that's when they start to fight Godzilla, uh, you know, and then, so Godzilla has a standoff with the army. Of course, he powers through with them, with ease, he wrecks the reinforcements. And while that's going on, there's this chase scene going on with Bruce again. Bruce ends up in a hairy situation himself. And of course, Betty confronts her dad, that telling him that this is, a bad idea. This, he doesn't have to do this. Godzilla is like threatening Japan because of like your plans and that stuff. And basically, it plays out like that scene, like similar to the Incredible Hulk 2008, where Betty's trying to stop like the situation. Like she's trying to, along with like some of the like the human characters helping out Bruce Banner, like he sees them like they're getting into trouble, like they're getting caught, and but Godzilla is heading towards the building, and then stuff is getting hairy there, and then Betty ends up getting hurt once again. Too much is going on, and then Bruce becomes the Hulk again, and then he actually has a standoff with the military. Meanwhile, the army gets ready to transport Godzilla's son. So, but however, the army is dealing with both Hulk and Godzilla. But of course, Godzilla and Hulk power through the army. They destroy their forces. Obviously, Godzilla is like a good distance far away from Hulk. However, Godzilla powers through them first, and then he gets there, and then Hulk just finishes, dealing with those army guys. Him and Bruce have Hulk and Betty have a moment, and meanwhile, like our other characters, get out of Dodge. The last remaining military forces there see Godzilla coming towards them, and they decide to take him on, and use their more stronger weapons against him. And Godzilla ends up fighting back, and Hulk sees Godzilla, who is also taking on the army, and Godzilla, like shoots his atomic breath, and Betty just so happens to get hurt. So this does not look good. It looked like Godzilla hurt Betty. He's fighting the army and that stuff. So Godzilla wipes the floor with them, and this is where he has a confront. Finally, we get to the first confrontation between the two. And of course, the military is watching. Betty gets knocked out on accident. She doesn't get knocked out, she passes out basically. Hulk puts her in like a very safe spot, or then Hulk gets peed off at Godzilla, and of course, this is where their first fight happens. Hulk leaps onto Godzilla and starts beating down on him. Godzilla like swats him away like a fly or something. He, Hulk like jumping at Godzilla, punching him, Hulk doing these sick, cool air maneuvers, while fighting Godzilla. And Godzilla's like, what the heck? Why is this little, well, like, who is this little pest? Like, who does he think he is? Godzilla's getting ticked off at the Hulk back. And so Godzilla starts, at first, Godzilla, like, starts to, he just kind of, like, casually just, like, stepping on him, like, hitting him normally, like, just mildly irritated of him. But as the fight goes on, Godzilla starts to get more frustrated in trying to kill the Hulk. And of course, it's a back and forth, and Hulk is just getting more peed off as the fight goes on. And it portrays like these two are equal in power. Like, it's force of nature versus force of nature, radioactive powerful force versus radioactive powerful force. It's the unstoppable force, versus the immovable object type of battle. It's epic. There, little bit of an earthquake is caused. There's some mountainsides, collapsing a little bit. Godzilla's kicking rocks at Hulk. Hulk is throwing like rocks at Godzilla. He attempts to blast him with his atomic breath. Godzilla is like trying to like kill him in a way like equivalent to like a human, like a person like trying to kill like a bug by like smashing them with their hand, or like attempting to stomp on them. But obviously he's using his tail as well. You just like see these like this blue and like green energy, submitting from from like their bodies and that stuff. Godzilla shooting his atomic breath. Hulk doing his iconic Hulk smash and thunderclaps. It's like they're just messing each other up, but like they just keep getting more ticked off. And like that's when the area is like getting more destroyed around them, and eventually they fall off a cliff. And the fight actually continues where there are aircraft carriers there, originally attempting to stop Godzilla. Some of them have retreated successfully, and now they end up in this scenario where Godzilla and Hulk are fighting under the water, and their fighting gets, really rough to the point where, like, a huge mountainside just collapses and just falls into the water that they're in and actually buries them. However, they get out of the debris and they are still fighting, continuing their battle. They are fighting underwater. Godzilla dominates the Hulk here, but we notice that Hulk gets angrier and he starts to adapt to the situation. So now Hulk is actually, he's fighting back at Godzilla underwater, you know. Here Godzilla is actually fighting better and he's more faster now, and he can actually keep up with Hulk. Um it's more intense now, but like Hulk is like doing his like screw you adaptation thing, and he's like, I don't care if you're more powerful than me in water, I'm taking you on. And he's still kind of like fighting and tackling with Godzilla under the water despite it being Godzilla's element. And eventually, they take the fight to the surface where Godzilla's like trying to shoot Hulk with his atomic breath. you know Hulk, is like, pretty much we get the same vibe like from Godzilla versus Kong 2021, where Hulk is like leaping from aircraft carrier to aircraft carrier, to try and fight Godzilla. And then, they take things back underwater again. Like these fights, I imagine to be like Peter Jackson King Kong, Hulk versus Wolverine, that scene in Hulk 2002 where he's fighting the Gamma Dogs, or when he fights the Abomination, in 2008. And of course, the MonsterVerse movies, like that, like those levels of like brutality in this fight. Like it's a brutal, savage fight. He like shows off their savagery, rage, and power, and even like what skill they have. Their powerful abilities, and like I also showed like their own little unique strengths. Godzilla, like his size advantage, and like he has his own unique abilities, and like he's got like his mouth full of sharp teeth. He's got the big claws. He's got his tail. His spikes can even be deadly. Hulk, he's kind of got like the agility, and he's actually a bit more smarter and more skilled. Well, Hulk, using weapons from the environment, but however, Godzilla's got that experience. Like, despite them being equal in power, there is a difference in their advantages, but they're still equal in power. They, but their advantages are like different and unique from one another. Eventually, an earthquake like under the water happens, and like with Godzilla, versus Mothra, the Heisei version, when Godzilla's fighting Batra, and like a crater like opens up or something. That is what happens here, and then like they just both, sink into the crater. Like the ground opens up, like they cause like an earthquake, and then they sink under the ground, and like they're still fighting each other. Or there's even some moments where you see like a little blast of like green energy from under the water, and then you see the atomic breath just like come up, and like now they're fighting like underwater, literally deep underground and like there's this big huge destructive clash, you know and like we feel like the earth and ground moving, like they're still duking it out, but eventually like they get lost on the radar map, and like they both seem to have disappeared. They're both gone. However, though, we still like see that the ground is shaking, like, and there's a couple of mountains that are still collapsing, and meanwhile there's some like natural disasters happening, like in like certain parts of the earth. There's like a flood somewhere, and then another there's like a huge gigantic like avalanche from like a mountain somewhere, like not really a snow one, but like another mountain crashes down, and then there's an earthquake, like a powerful destructive earthquake. If some stuff that is not even close to the area, like some stuff malfunctions and then they blow up. Like, even though they're gone, this technically means that the Hulk and Godzilla are still fighting, and their destructive radioactive power is like threatening the planet. And like, there's this huge, like, random, we see this huge, like, random energy crash, on the radar map, from the ocean, and then it dives down, a little bit. Like, there still is like an earthquake and they're shaking here and there, but it slowly like starts to calm down. And like, they fully lost the Hulk and Godzilla. Like, we don't know where they've gone to. Um However, so like, we have a time jump where it's like some more hours later, and then Godzilla and the Hulk, burst out in like this like far away like volcanic island or something. Hulk, is still peed off, like, Bruce Banner is still the Hulk, Hulk is still like ready to go for round two, and then, so is Godzilla, and like, but they're more ticked off and peed off now, more powerful looking, and they start fighting on this more like smaller island with like a volcanic type of like area or something, which means, that there is some lava involved. So like, there's like a crater or something, and then like the Hulk and Godzilla go for round two. This is just like in the first fight, like, there were like a little bit of cutaways maybe to like some of our characters and this and that to like the humans, but it was still like a really good fight, mostly focused on them fighting. Here this time, it's just these two, and like, they're just duking it out. It's brutal, it's aggressive, it's epic. They're just like, you can feel the power of these two, like they're clashing. Hulk getting up in Godzilla's face and like punching him on the snout and that stuff. Godzilla like scratches him away. Um, Hulk attempts to like kind of use the environment to his advantage a little bit, and he starts, once again throwing rocks at him, and like, he actually uses them like a little, like some of the objects in his environment, like a little crafty, like what we see in the Incredible Hulk 2008. But Godzilla is starting to catch on to, like, and show off more of his own skill, against Hulk. So they fight some more, and eventually, they make it to like the lava type areas, and like they end up in like another underground area, but this time, like, it's more destroyed now, and like, and there's this point where they literally start fighting in the lava. Like, they do not give a heck if like they're getting burned or not. Like, they are fighting each other. Or, it's like that stage gimmick where in like some of the Atari Godzilla fighting games where you can fight in the lava, it's like that. They're brawling and they're fighting in the lava, and eventually the whole, like, Godzilla and Hulk have this huge power clash, underground, but like on this island, and the volcano blows up and the whole island just gets blown up and gets destroyed. It was an island that had like a volcano on it, so like, there wasn't. It was more like an abandoned island where there wasn't really like all that much life on it. Like, animal, like whatever animal like was living there, like already like had escaped. But the volcanic island literally gets destroyed, and then there's like this catastrophic event, you know, and like, once again, like, a couple more like natural disasters happen around the world. It's crazy. And then we cut to, our characters, recovering, from the scenario, and like, they're trying to comprehend, what just went down. um Godzilla's son is in fear, like, he doesn't know what happened to his dad. um and eventually, Betty, and like the characters she's with, like, they're like, they're trying to track down themselves, like, where the Hulk and Godzilla at, and so is the army. And eventually, like some hours go by, and like a few hours go by, or like a couple, and then straight up, there the Hulk shows up on, like, well, one of the dots show up on the radar map, and straight out of like a moment from Hulk 2003, like Hulk bursts out into this random city in Japan from under the ground, and like all like juiced up on power, and like ready to like just like end up causing more destruction with his rage. But then he slowly starts to realize that there are people there, or they are innocent people there. Like they see him and they are just horrified of him. And then like Hulk actually slowly starts to calm down, and then like he's looking at the environment, like looking at the destruction he accidentally caused, and like he actually starts to get like kind of like a sad sympathetical look on his face. And then that is when Betty calls out to him. They make it to that location. Betty calls out to him, and her and Hulk have a bonding moment together. We get the iconic Hulk saying Betty, and they have a touching moment. But then like Hulk is all like drained, and then that when Hulk calms down, now that Hulk has reached his calmest, he ends up getting a little tired, and he ends up transforming back to Bruce. And then Bruce just like passes out from like all like the energy and and power from his Hulk state. Unfortunately, the army tracks down the location, and they take in Bruce Banner unconscious. So, and of course, Betty and our main characters end up at that base, and like they don't know where Godzilla's went to, where Godzilla's gone to. So the military now has Bruce in their possession, and General Ross also wants to use Bruce Banner's Hulk power and energy and blood, to like for some of their weapons they're going to create along with Godzilla's son. So, but then they get a notification from like one of their other like from like an army base, another army base they have, and like another army team, that that they picked up the other red dot, and they picked up the other dot on the radar map. And of course it's Godzilla, like straight up Mothra versus Godzilla style. He rises up from the ground and the dirt, or just like erupts from the mountains, and he just comes out, and like and then he's wreaking havoc again, like destroys that army base. And then Godzilla is on the way again. And then Godzilla eventually they send out more forces to deal with Godzilla, and of course it doesn't work. Godzilla's just peed off now. He's had enough. He is going to get his son back. He's tracking his son down. Like now he kind of knows like the area. And they had too much of an early guess that Godzilla was defeated, so their base was like near a city. So, um, yep. So Godzilla is making his way, but to like the location, he's tracking him down, and he's tracking down the army, like going to get his son back. Meanwhile, like the army, you know, is like planning, like what to do, like what they're gonna do, and like they're gonna start the weapon process with Godzilla's son now. But of course, our good guys, they have a plan. So the other characters kind of get sent away. However, our some of our characters, that work with the army, are good guys. They they end up They once again they turn to the good guy side, and they end up helping out Bruce and Betty. Meanwhile, our other like normal human characters, they're gonna try to get out of Dodge. They know Godzilla is coming, and basically the army gets ready to like gets the city, like get ready to evacuate, because like there's a chance that Godzilla might show up. Meanwhile, we finally cut back to Mothra, and she hatches into her Himago state, into her Himago. So like now, like she's fully transformed now. Mothra flies, out, out into the sky to go like confront the army and that stuff, break free, Godzilla's son. So the military continues with their plan. You know, their plan, they're getting ready with their plan. And however, are good military characters who actually switch the good guy side, and they're actually helping, you know, Bruce and like Betty escaped, and they get ready to they they help them hack into the system, and basically Bruce Banner and or goes into like a disguise mode. So kind of like that one level from the whole 2003 game where Bruce Banner, goes into a disguise as like a soldier, and he has to, escape the military base. So it's like kind of like that level. So we kind of get a moment like that. And with his great intelligence and IQ, he hacks into the system with the help of some of the other military characters, the good ones who obviously switch to the good guy side and are looking to portray, these antagonistic military dudes, you know, and they actually succeed this time. Little Godzilla, he's set free, but but the military, try to hold like Godzilla's son down, like little Godzilla's like they still trap him like in the containment, but like the containment is still like weak. Is actually weakened, so he actually does have a chance to still escape and get out. But they're trying to keep him, they're trying to keep him contained still. Bruce Banner, is like helping like the good military characters, and against like the antagonistic ones. Bruce Bruce has to escape the base though, and with the help of Betty, they get out of there. Betty also helped obviously, but because they already started like the weapon process on like Godzilla's son, Godzilla's son like gets drained of energy because like he had to fight his way out there. When he gets out of the base, Godzilla's son like he just kind of like he goes like like kind of like collapses, like nothing bad happened to him. It's just that he was drained, like he got drained of energy because like he was the power source for the weapon. So like he's all tired, he passes out. Well, he ends up taking like a little nap. So like he goes into napping mode for like a while. Meanwhile, while that's happening, the some of the military members are trying to hunt down Bruce Banner. Betty is helping Bruce escape. It's another chase sequence here. Like our other characters get involved, and Godzilla Godzilla shows up, and he is going to destroy the city. Like he doesn't care. Like he sees most humans as the same, so like he's gonna destroy like the city. Like some of the people didn't get the chance to get out of there yet. So, like, but this still isn't good because the people are still trying to evacuate, and get out of there. Godzilla showed up pretty early, and our characters, that the Mothra, the twin fairies were helping, they get into this trouble and hairy situation too, and they are like they're about to get caught up, in Godzilla's atomic breath attacks right now, and like some people. So Godzilla is gonna end up, he's gonna end up causing a lot of deaths, and this is when Mothra comes to the rescue. She like out of defense, she ends up like hitting Godzilla, knocking him into the water, buying more time for the people to evacuate. He, Mothra tries to like she tries to like convince Godzilla, like she is gonna try to get his son, but now like she had to defend, the people and that stuff. Now Godzilla's provoked, and and it's like oh dang it, Mothra's fighting. Mothra gets herself into another fight with Godzilla again. It's like a oh come on situation because like she was getting ready to like get Godzilla's son, but she had to save the people. So he doesn't have to do that. So obviously that makes Godzilla see that Mothra is on the side of the humans, and obviously Godzilla fights with Mothra. They have like another standoff. While that's going on, while they're fighting, like they have a little fight, but however Mothra ends up losing to Godzilla. Godzilla ends up like damaging her like pretty badly, and she gets like knocked out and like falls in the water or something. Mothra's out of the way. Godzilla proceeds to the city, but much more people evacuated, so she did buy some time. And like little Godzilla, he can't make himself known to his dad because he's passed out now. So like he's in napping mode. So Godzilla starts to destroy the city, and like while like some of the people are like trying to escape, but they're also like hiding in these like specific shelters, built to like hide, from kaiju and that stuff. And meanwhile, this part of the army is still trying to capture Bruce Banner and that stuff. However, it just so happens that Betty accidentally ends up getting like shot in like the shoulder area. She doesn't like the bullet doesn't directly like land into her. It just like like it kind of like scratches her shoulder a bit, like just but like she still took like a hit from it technically. It's not fatal, but like however Bruce just ends up losing it. He flips out. He gets emotional. Like he from his point of view, it looks like Betty just got like hurt severely, and she passes out for so like so Bruce just like while they're trying to like get like while they're like the military, these soldier guys like they're trying to get rid of him and that stuff. Well, actually no. Well, they're trying to capture Bruce, get to him. So like she doesn't get shot, but like the military accidentally does a thing where they get Betty like badly injured or something. And of course this causes Bruce to get emotional cuz like he thought that it looked like Betty was like fatally injured, but like she wasn't. It was just like a normal bad injury. However, Bruce can't take it anymore, and then he hulks out again, transforms into the Hulk again, and he really like wipes the floor with those military reinforcements. He gets them out of the way. Meanwhile, Godzilla is like wreaking havoc in the city, and Godzilla defeats them. I mean, Hulk defeats the military reinforcements, and Godzilla also defeats whatever military reinforcements like they try to get send, after him or whatever. However, you know, because of the damage little Godzilla did to the facility, w- pretty much all of like the military basically is defeated at this point. However, Godzilla is destroying the city, and this is when Hulk, meets face to face with him again. You know, so Hulk sees that Godzilla is destroying the city, and we get Hulk actually saving a few people. He actually saving some of the innocent civilians, and then Godzilla actually sees the Hulk helping people. So, and this just pees off Godzilla because like now like he tried to like destroy him before but like he failed to do so. He didn't get the chance to fully pull him down. Like he notices that he is still alive, and he's helping people. So Godzilla, in Godzilla's perspective, he sees most humans as the same. So Godzilla takes it that he sees the Hulk on their side. So like this piece off Godzilla, and now Godzilla is fully against the Hulk now. Godzilla gets peed off, and then the Hulk sees that Godzilla, is, destroying the city and he's attacking the innocent civilians. This also pees off Hulk, against Godzilla. So some of these civilians escape, you know. Hulk defends, the people from Godzilla's rage, and like obviously Hulk's anger collides with Godzilla, and this is where the final battle begins. you know it starts off at first like Hulk is like he's fighting Godzilla but mostly like defending, fending him off, you know against him, helping the people out, like, but he does take more damage until finally the remaining civilians, they retreat to like a bunker, like a shelter that's like built to like, you know, to basically, like protect them from kaiju attacks and this and that. And then, then Godzilla and Hulk continue their fight, Godzilla and the Hulk, like this fight, brutal, savage, and then like there's like multiple cool moments happen throughout this final battle, like Godzilla keeps batting Hulk away, and then Hulk like keeps coming back at him, in the air, like he thunderclaps his way back. Um, it's another back and forth fight, but once again, showing the even though it's equal, they do have their own unique advantages on each other, and that I show that here, like they're using their abilities against each other, once again Hulk with his Hulk smash and the thunderclap and uses like some form of like gamma energy like attacks. Godzilla like uses his nuclear pulse at like a moment and then like uses the atomic breath. Hulk is like dodging Godzilla's atomic breath, like similar to how Kong dodges the atomic breath, in GVK 2021. They're just smashing and slamming each other into buildings. Things like you can see and like feel their power. I show their power like in this fight. Like the environment is just getting completely wrecked around them. They're just like getting angrier, and stronger as the fight goes on. Godzilla getting more just angrier and putting in more of his power. Hulk, putting in more of his power, getting angrier, getting stronger, or like have some cool moments like they're crashing into buildings. Godzilla literally just starts like dragging Hulk like across buildings, slamming him like with his fist, and like once again tries to stomp on him and like smash him with his hand, hit him with his claws, trying to bite him and that stuff. Hulk like takes this like sharp weapon and then he stabs Godzilla with it, and there's even like a brutal part where Hulk like rips out like a small like part of like one of Godzilla's spikes and he starts stabbing him with it. There's a scene where Godzilla like brutally just so happens to bite Hulk. You know, Godzilla actually there's a part where Godzilla actually slaps Hulk, uses his tail against him. Well, I want to have this cool maneuver that Hulk does where like Hulk like is fighting Godzilla, like he keeps hitting him with punches. Hulk keeps thunder clapping back, you know, to go like hit Godzilla again and again. There's this part where Hulk knocks Godzilla over. He's just like smashing on him on the ground. Godzilla, tail whips him away. Like every now and then uses his atomic breath against him. And I want to have this cool, funny moment. It's like where Godzilla like attempts to slam Hulk with like his palm. Hulk actually like grabs his hand and like he tries to and he starts like lifting Godzilla's hand up, and Godzilla just makes this angry, like confused expression, like what the heck? That's basically what his look will say, like his face basically like he's like laying out an angry growl and roar, like and with a confused expression, a look that basically says like what the heck, like what the heck. Like I would probably even have like a point where Hulk actually breaks like a couple of Godzilla's fingers, and then Godzilla's like they heal into place again. Godzilla inflicts some damaging wounds on the Hulk, he heals up. And there's this like cool moment where Godzilla like unleashes a powerful stomp on the Hulk, but then you see like Hulk getting stronger and like he starts to lift up Godzilla's, leg and feet off of him. Hmm. There's this part, they're both going beast mode on each other, and there's this part where where Godzilla basically kind of goes like beast mode, crocodile mode, attempting to like try to basically like just full on like just maul and devour Hulk, like he's had enough of him. Basically like what we saw in GVK 2021. And there's this moment where Godzilla actually eats and devours Hulk. However, Hulk like starts like he starts to like try to mess him up from the inside, and then Godzilla like spits him and like shoots him out of his body with his atomic breath, you know. And like there's like a moment where like they look tired and that stuff, like they're starting to look tired, but then they make eye contact again, and then they both roar in anger, or just like they just needed like a few seconds to catch their breath, and then there they go, like back at full energy again, stamina, round two. Ooh, and obviously we start to see more of Hulk's strength in this fight. We actually start to see more of Godzilla's skill and like agility. Like we also like see like they actually are starting to adapt to fighting each other. So the unique advantages that Hulk has, at least in this fight, like Hulk is like a bit smarter, he's been more skilled and he's more agile. Godzilla starts to adapt to that, and there's even like a couple of moments where Godzilla like does a little bit of a leap to try to catch Hulk, and this part where Hulk jumps at Godzilla and at lightning speed, he thunderclaps his way to Godzilla at lightning speed, and then Godzilla just like grabs them. It's like an equivalent to like one of those like kung fu masters like grabbing an arrow. Like Hulk is trying to outmaneuver Godzilla in combat. Godzilla just catches him and throws him back. I want to have this fun little moment where Godzilla actually grabs Hulk and crushes him in his fist, and then he throws him with like his full arm strength, and it looks like Final Wars Kamunga style, like Godzilla Final Wars Kamunga style, where he throws him, and it looks like the Hulk gets thrown in the orbit or like to space, but then you see this flash of like green energy, and Hulk thunderclaps his way back down to Godzilla, and then he slams Godzilla again. They even kind of like use buildings against each other a little bit. Hulk is now adapting to Godzilla's strengths as well. Like 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 Godzilla's size advantage is starting to not matter that much anymore. Or Hulk with the screw you wall adaptation, like he's starting to make Godzilla trip now, like just by hitting his legs, and he does like the classic Kuryu Mecha Godzilla, against Mechagodzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla in 1962 maneuver where he grabs Godzilla by the tail and he swings him, and throws him a far distance away. They go beast mode on each other more, and eventually they take the fight to like the water, you know, and eventually Godzilla does like this part where Hulk actually tries to break Godzilla's jaws, and Godzilla actually does like a full power, like a blast, like base atomic blue atomic breath, and it literally sends the Hulk to space. He's our characters, like they're getting out of Dodge, Betty, gets recovered, um, and like basically we see what they're doing for like a little bit, but then Hulk comes back down, and he legit just looks like a gamma meteorite crashing down onto the earth. Godzilla sees this, and Godzilla just gets enraged, furious, and Godzilla just forces out like what we see like could potentially be possibly be his full power. We don't know, but then we see, the spikes go from like blue to red, and it's the spiral ray atomic breath. And then Godzilla like blasts the spiral ray atomic breath, while Hulk it looks like a full power move, crashing down like a green meteorite. He, and Hulk actually, right before Hulk lands in Godzilla's mouth, that is when Godzilla fires the spiral ray atomic breath, and there is this clash of like powerful energy, and, this big catastrophic explosion happens. A good chunk of the city gets destroyed, and again we see that thing where natural disasters kind of happen. A couple of them happen, or a few of them happen across the world. It's almost like they're like their whole fight and their with that big explosion just like shook completely just shook the whole earth. It's a catastrophic, destructive if thing that happens. So, like, by the way, if I use some words in here, like, forgive me, if they turn out to be like wrong definitions, but like, you know what I mean. I'm trying to say, but this is like destructive, powerful, and this and that, and the whole area just looks destroyed, like wrecked. However, some of the people are safe. Most of them, um, some of them might be injured or have like radiation poisoning, and they're gonna get like attempt to get fixed up. Um, like we do see something like that later a little bit. No sighting of the Hulk or Godzilla, and then that is when Godzilla's son finally awakens from his little nap, and he wakes up, and then like he sees like the whole destroyed area, and then like he senses his dad is nearby though, so he goes to see, but like he's kind of walking slowly. Um, we see a recovered Betty, you know, like it just so happened, it wasn't a fatal injury, she recovered easily. Like she is in like pain though, but she powers through it. Mm, our other characters like kind of help her somewhat, and Godzilla and Hulk reemerge. So, however, they are a far distance away from each other. Hulk just so happens to end up like a good long far distance away, and then like in the far, very far distance, you see Godzilla reemerge. There is one thing I forgot to add though, like even though like their destructive power, was destructive, it was like powerful and dangerous. It actually could have done a whole lot more damage. But however, a recovered Mothra in time just so happened to, you know, fend off against some of the, explosions and that stuff. She basically did like a almost like a Superman kind of move, like she ran around like big parts of like certain areas like in that destination. And so like she basically like went around like super speed to like stop some parts of the earth from like, you know, being like destroyed and this and that. And we even see like Mothra like possibly use her full power, some of her full power in some way. However, this completely drains her. She makes it back to the location. So we cut back to it, and like what I was talking about. So Hulk and Godzilla reemerge. We see our characters again. Hulk reemerges, Godzilla reemerges in the far distance, and in the far distance, Hulk reemerges. Um, Hulk looks at the city around him. It's like completely destroyed, and like he kind of has this moment, like kind of like Avengers: Age of Ultron, where he's like looking around at like the like good chunk of like half of the destruction he might have caused, and like he has this sad look on his face, and like he kind of like calms down and stops and looks at the scenario, you know, and they come to like our main characters come to the conclusion, if the Hulk and Godzilla keep on fighting, this won't end until like one of them is dead. And like we don't even know if one of them can die from this type of battle. Like it's gonna go keep going on, and it's gonna threaten, like it's gonna destroy the country and like the continents and threaten the world and the universe. There's a chance that their power is just gonna keep rising and rising. Of course, Betty is the one that can calm down the Hulk. So like Hulk is like you like viewing the destruction, that happened like all around him, and he has like a sad like look on his face, and then he sees Godzilla emerge in the far, far distance, like Hulk is like growling and like he's getting ready to fight, and that's when Betty, she goes like stop, and then like it gets Hulk's attention, and then she lands in like she's in a helicopter basically, from like some of our military characters that actually turned to the good side, that got redeemed, you know. So she goes to calm down the Hulk, and they have a touching, moment. And meanwhile, they also like Godzilla and his son also have like a touching, reunitement. So like finally, Godzilla and his son reunite, and Hulk actually sees in the distance that you know he sees this in the distance, the basically like the love of a parent, that he has like a loved one too, like in a way, Godzilla has like a form of family, like what family he has left. Like Hulk like kind of in a way puts two and two together, and we get like a flashback moment. And because if you think about it, Hulk is like a resemblance of like he's kind of like Bruce's past self, like he is a part of Bruce. So and it goes like back to like the trauma story, of Bruce Banner, where like his mother, sadly, suffered like a demise in the hands of his abusive, evil dad. Like he did like serve justice to his own dad by even like killing him apparently at one point. But Bruce remembered that his mom did love him, and like somewhere like this triggers a memory. Like Hulk like sees, Godzilla and the son reuniting, and basically like, it's like the love of a parent basically. So despite all that fighting, Hulk actually, now calmed down by Betty, and now seeing them, and Godzilla doesn't see, he just so happens to not see Hulk, and Godzilla and his son, they swim away, into the ocean, back into their natural habitat, and basically, Hulk, lets them go. So if you think about it, it's like, so there you go. So if you think about it, it's basically in a way like it's basically like a little bit of the power of love in a way. So like it stops like Godzilla and the Hulk from like fighting and basically, being a threat to like the earth. So Godzilla and his son, they swim away. Um Hulk just lets them go, and Mothra, kind of helps and like makes one last appearance. I would have it where Mothra actually, kind of helped guide little Godzilla to, his dad. So I would add that in there, and Godzilla actually clearly sees that like Mothra was actually trying to help, and Godzilla kind of makes a look just like, oh dang, I should have. Godzilla makes like a look that basically says like, oh dang, I should have listened better. Anyway, like Mothra, like, she kind of flies away. They have a truce, and then Godzilla and his son, they swim off into the ocean, now reunited and have a touching, reuniting moment. Hulk lets them go because now that Betty's calmed him down and like sees that like that, and Hulk in a way like basically like somehow just put it together in his mind that like maybe he's a broken tragic creature like me or something, kind of something like that. So like they go back into natural habitat, they swim off into the sea, you know, and then Mothra like does like a little bit of a farewell thing along with the twin fairies, you know, our main characters and like the Hulk see this. So she kind of helps a little bit, but then she goes back to Infant Island, and Hulk actually does this thing where like he actually helps some of the people like out of the debris and this and that, showing more of his hero side. Like even though like here comes like a little bit of the tragic part. Him and Betty have like one last moment, but even though despite the Hulk like helping some of the people, some people like are still like kind of scared of him, like they're threatened by him. It goes back to Hulk's tragedy. He's a lonely creature and this and that, but some people actually see that like hey, he actually kind of helped us and this and that. So him and Hulk and Betty have one last moment, and of course, like kind of like a reference to like the scene in The Incredible 2008 where like they have like a touching moment, and then there's like the helicopters, and like some of like a little bit like whatever military reinforcement is left. He sees that, and like Hulk doesn't really fight. He basically has like a little goodbye moment with Betty, and then that is when like Hulk makes his way like out of the city, like a cool like going through like the city, and then he leaps out, and then he gets out of Dodge. Basically, he escapes. Oops. He leaps somewhere, to go find peace, to calm down. So we have one last little moment of Betty confronting her dad, and this and that, talking some sense into him, and then then she just leaves, and the army like sees the destruction, and basically some of them realize this was their fault, and of course our protagonists, you know the good military guys, like I want to have this one, are some of our protagonists, that did work on the military, they turn to the good side, and you know their main they turn to the good side, they're good guys now, and I like to have like a powerful similar like message and line here, like in Godzilla versus Biollante, where like he says, like one military guy says it's like to like General Ross and like some of the other army, just like after learning about Godzilla and the Hulk slash Banner, hmm, hmm, Godzilla and the Hulk like may appear like monsters, but however, the truth is like they're actually are both like they're both tragically, broken creatures. They may appear like monsters, but on the inside, reality, they are both broken, tragic creatures. And they aren't monsters. And the people who made them and created them, made them the way they are the real monsters. Like I want to have like a powerful, message like that. And then it basically goes, basically like the world is recovering, like some parts of the, Japan is recovering from this, and Betty, she's back on her own again, and we get like a little last farewell from like our other human characters and this and that. General Ross, and some of the army members, the antagonistic ones, in defeat, and we get a shot of like Mothra resting, on Infant Island, the Twin Fairies, and we even get like one last little shot of Anguirus and Rodan, once again like trying to find their own peace, and resting in like nature somewhere. And we give off our last little farewell to like the other human characters, and you know, we get one last little scene, where like through like a phone or something like Bruce, who luckily, gets into contact with Betty, you know, basically like a little bit of a farewell for now. Like we will meet again someday. So basically, like they have like a little reuniting over the phone one last time. Mm, and then that's when they split their paths for now, but like obviously they're gonna keep in touch, and Betty is gonna help him like any way she could. And then we cut back to Godzilla and his son. They're resting, back on their new home island that they found. And like they're both are resting, and like now they're at peace. Together. You know, now they're at peace, and we cut back to Bruce Banner. Like, you know, still like keeping moving forward, And I would like to close off with the iconic piano tune. Do 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 na 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 you know what I'm talking about. Basically, the little tune, basically what they play like at the end of every episode, of the original like 1970s, television series, of the Hulk. So like basically like any little story that the Hulk is involved in, like that's how I want every story, to close out, And it ends with that, and that is how the story ends, with the end. And credits roll. So that was my fanfiction crossover story, Godzilla versus Hulk. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Once again, this actually dragged on even longer than the Godzilla versus Bowser one. I actually thought this was gonna be shorter, but but okay, I want this to be on the shorter side, but like I end up having a lot to say and like a lot of story details. But if you even take the interest, to sit down and like listen to like my crossover story, like I heavily really appreciate that. You know, I appreciate you and thank you so much. Anyways, thank you guys and gals so much for watching. Let me know down in the comment section below like what you thought of my fan fiction story. And of course, if you have like any little problems with it, like maybe you can help me maybe improve it. Yeah, and I'll also credit you people as well. Anyways, thank you guys and gals so much for watching. I love you all. Have a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night, depending on whatever time of the day you're watching this. And as good old Kong Spideyzilla says, peace out.